with you. Souvenir, I guess. There you go. So I'm Liesl Dish. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for Southern Indiana for the Energizing Indiana Community Outreach Program.
Yeah, one of them will do this.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Read it all in here too. Yeah.
Well, if we're going to sign up,
Well, there's a method to the madness, so you can take one if you want it. If you don't, that's okay.
He can't read and write, so.
Thank you. And for your
He's got his glasses.
I'll just leave this here for you. So I cover 20 counties in the Southern Indiana area, 20 and a half actually now. So I travel around all over the place. And I understand that you're familiar with the program already. And several have already signed up. Is there anyone in the room that hasn't signed up for their home energy assessment yet?
Well, I live out in the county and I have REMCs.
Yeah, the REMCs unfortunately are not participating with us, but they do have a program that's similar in terms of efficiency, so you're welcome to contact them and find out what they have available. Has everyone had their assessment yet? Yes? No? Okay, well, I'll run you through the steps of it just so that you know. When you have your energy assessment, you should be contacted to set up your appointment. If there's anybody who's signed up and hasn't been contacted, then please see me after the meeting and I will get your information and we'll sort that out. But everyone should have been called at least by now to set up your appointment. Once we come out for the assessment, we will bring this very exciting kit that has 9 CFL light bulbs. They're the squiggly ones like this, and I'll pass this around in case anyone wants to see it. You get 2 energy efficient shower heads, 2 bathroom sink aerators that will go on your bathroom faucet. They're little, like this, and then a kitchen sink aerator, and you can pop that in and it drops down and swivels so you can wash your fruit or your animals or whatever you put in your sink. And I'll pass this around in case anyone wants to look at it. They'll bring out the kit. They will install anything for you that you're interested in having installed. It is not necessary for you to have every single thing in there. If you're not comfortable with changing the shower heads, then they'll just leave them for you. You might know somebody that you can give it to later, or you might decide after a while that you want to have it. So the kit is yours no matter what. They'll go through and check the efficiency of your home. They're going to evaluate your furnace, hot water heater, air conditioner, check your insulation. They will check your refrigerator and stove, your washer and dryer for efficiency. With your hot water heater, if you have an electric hot water heater and it won't void the warranty, they'll put an insulating blanket wrap on that and insulate up to 6 feet of hot water pipe so that you're not losing heat through the metal and it's all being contained in there. They'll check the ductwork, any visible ductwork they can find. They'll go up into your attic, check that out, make sure that you're not losing energy in that area. And then when they're done, they will print a report just like this that explains your efficiency areas in your home. It basically tells you, it's very reader friendly. It tells you what they were looking for, like in this paragraph on the top of the page, and then what you currently have in your home, what you can do to make it more efficient, and what that could do for your bill. And they go through and explain this page by page. My very favorite of all of them is the last page. It's zero cost and low cost solutions. These are things that you can start doing right away that aren't going to be very expensive, like replacing a furnace or adding new insulation, but things that will just help you to start cutting down immediately. And you look like a very efficient crowd already, so they might not be new things to you, but it's helpful for some. So I'll pass this as well if you want to see it. Once we're done with that, of course, I'm sure you know by now that the Historical Society gets $25. Do you have questions about that?
I have one question. Will they do anything with the gas hot water heater?
Unfortunately, we can't.
So they don't put a blanket on it or insulate the
I think
pipes?
that's actually a safety issue with not putting the blanket on the gas so it doesn't ignite. Which would, of course, be a bad thing.
Okay.
So no, they don't do anything with the gas hot water heaters. And also because we are electrically focused. We work with the electric utilities and not the gas ones. So that's the rundown of basically what we do. Now, the packets that I gave you help to explain what we're doing and what the project is. And the idea with the packet is that there's a sign-up sheet on the back of each page, and if everyone in this room were to talk to 5 people and have them sign up, or call your children or your family members that are elsewhere in the state, we are a statewide program, and we cover all of the utilities with the exception of the REMCs. So you can call friends and family that you have elsewhere in the state, sign them up for the program, and then Tell City Historical Society will still get the $25 for it. So you can just use that sign-up sheet that you have, and there's a flyer there that helps explain it. There's a picture of the kit that helps explain that. And you're welcome, to call us if you have additional questions about it. But don't be afraid to reach out. You can try to partner with your churches maybe. That's a great opportunity there as well. So the idea is, branch out and help bring this in, because I just went through the museum. It's pretty incredible. It's really neat to see all this history in one place. So definitely, that's the idea. Are there questions? Okay, just to let you know a couple other things. We have some other programs. We work with commercial buildings. We have a commercial and industrial prescriptive rebate program, so any updates that are made to lighting, HVAC systems, commercial kitchen equipment, and certain Energy Star improvements can all be covered with our rebate program. And if you have questions about that, I can leave my card, and then you can contact me and I'll put you in touch with the right person for it. We have a 5th grade science education program where 5th grade teachers can actually go on our website and sign up for big kits of basically everything that's in that kit there, but there's also experiments and night lights and a little whistly thing that you put on your air conditioning vent, so when it's time to change the vent it whistles. But we always say write yourself a note that there's a whistly thing on your vent, because otherwise you'll be walking around, what is that noise?
Service call. They call it.
Exactly. So just something to keep in mind, but we do have those programs available. We also do school audits where we'll actually go through the school and do an inspection there. And in addition to our home energy assessment program, we have an income qualified weatherization program where certain homes will also qualify to have insulation blown in if they have electric heat, and have sealing done, checking the home for any air leaks that are there. So some homes qualify for that, some don't. If you're on the energy assistance program, you should automatically qualify. So those are just the rest of our programs. But I'll be here, so feel free to ask me any questions that you have, and go get them.
Yeah, the thing to remember is, I think, like, say everybody here, or most everybody here is signed up that can.
Right.
But, for every neighbor you get signed up or anything else, it's $25 for us, and they get free each and free advice, so.
Yep. And there are 11 people in this room, so if every person has 4 that sign up, just 4 for 11 people, well, 12, 13, 14, all right, I can count. There's 14 people in this room. 4 people is $100, so that's $1,400 right there. And 4 is so easy. It's, talk to your neighbors on each side and a friend from church and call your sister in South Bend and you're done. So it's very easy to achieve that, and something that will make a huge difference. I think that will probably be very impactful. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, tonight's presentation is about short stories that Bert Fenn wrote. And what he did was send a story to his friends every year. And when he finished all those, he decided he had enough for a book. So it's all about the river and steamboats. And Joe is going to read the ones that I've marked.
Joe's going to read it.
Joe's going to read it.
Oh, okay.
Requiem for a steamboat.
Requiem.
Requiem. I stood there dumbstruck. Someone had buried a steamboat right here in Hallsville, Kentucky Cemetery. It was right there with the other graves and way up on top of the hill, a mile or more above the river. Finding it was an accident, of course. This is one of those pretty Sundays last fall, and it seemed like a good time to look for Captain J.W. Carlton's grave. So that's what I was doing, really nosing around there in the cemetery when I stumbled onto this grave. Let me tell you, I was surprised. But it was a steamboat, all right. It said so on the tombstone. Here lies the remains of the ill-fated steamer, the Reindeer, that blew up on the Ohio River between Hallsville and Canton on March 13, 1854, erected by the public donation sponsored by W.P. McDonald. Well, I just stood there asking myself, why not? They buried Viking ships, didn't they? And some of the old river captains were just as fond of their boats as the Vikings, weren't they? Just because a lot of them didn't do it is no sign that one of them couldn't bury a steamboat, is it? Then more questions kept coming up that weren't so easy to answer, and let me tell you, when you start visualizing a couple hundred feet of steamboat buried in a cemetery, the questions could come up all right. It beats anything how curiosity can win out over enchantment. Anyway, by this time something was pulling at my memory, so I rushed home and started to check the situation out. Now, if you want to stay right here enchanted, you can just stop me anytime, but imagine you're like me and won't be satisfied until you get the whole story. So this is the way I pieced it together. First, the Reindeer. She was a side maneuver. 252 by 31 and a half by 5.5, built at New Albany in 1851. She came out of Louisville, New Orleans trade that in 1853 was put in a line between Louisville and St. Louis. That sure puts her in the vicinity of all right. But getting down to the specifics, I found her March 16, 1854, across the river from Hallsville, Hamilton, Indiana. It's 10 o'clock at night, and she's rounding out from Boyd's Wharf boat, bound for St. Louis. Right then is when her starboard boiler exploded. And it's hard to say what might have happened next if the Iroquois hadn't been coming up the river. She landed the Reindeer below Hamilton, where doctors from both Hallsville and Hamilton did what they could for the victims. It must have been pretty bad. If you look this up in the Steamboat Inspector's report for 1854, you'll see that 38 lives were lost in that explosion. The inspectors blamed it all on the engineer, took away his license. Then they concluded the report by saying, but as he soon died from the injuries received at the time, a further prosecution, which was intended, became impractical. Now here comes the first twist. A few weeks after this explosion, the Reindeer was sold to the Chicago and Mississippi Railroad Company over at Alton, Illinois. They patched her up and ran her on the Mississippi River until she was snagged November 17, 1857 at Wood River, Illinois. That's over there near Alton, and I guess that's where you have to say her grave is, at Wood River, Illinois. Getting back to that grave at Hallsville, I haven't mentioned one report of the explosion. This account says, quote, toward morning, the Magnolia took the Reindeer across to Hallsville, where on the following day, the bodies of the deceased were given reverent interment in one large grave. That's the only reference to a grave I could find. Furthermore, the old-timers over there in Hallsville tell the story about the same way. Though through the years, there was always someone who could point out the grave for you and who had to be shown for it was not marked. Well, that brings us to Walter P. McDonald of Hallsville. He was one of the last few who knew where that grave was. When he was getting on in years, he began to wonder who would remember its location after he was gone. So in 1959, he started a campaign and personally collected money from the folks around Hallsville to erect a monument to those poor souls who lost the Reindeer in 1854. Mr. McDonald erected his monument over the victim's mass grave and dedicated it on March 13, 1959. It was his stone that I found in the cemetery that day. Mr. McDonald's heart was in the right place, all right, and I sure respect him for what he did. But he should have taken more care in writing that epitaph. So now you know, too, that I can tell I wasn't so happy either. I was wishing I hadn't been so curious. It sure would have been nice to have a steamboat buried there in Hallsville. One thing about it, though, you can't get mad at Mr. McDonald. Why, without his epitaph, there wouldn't be any story at all. And you'd have to hand him that. That epitaph sure does inspire fantasies in a person. Well, I just about had it all figured out. The way I saw it back in 1854, there probably was room for a steamboat in that cemetery if you laid it down right. And if I'd have done it, I'd have put the tombstone right over the forecastle facing aft. That way, if you left the jackstaff standing, you'd have a dandy flagpole just behind the stone. Now about the services. If you looked up what the Vikings did about pallbearers, They probably had some good ideas, having tested them out, and I'd say that. But that's the trouble with this story. You have to keep watching yourself. It's mighty hard to keep from thinking about that steamboat funeral. And the more you think about it, the more reasons you can find for what might have happened. Why, all you have to do is start thinking about some of the characters out on the river back those days and say, well, there you go again. Well, knowing all the facts, you can do as you please about this situation, but I've made up my mind. I won't have any peace until I find one more pass at it. Come spring, I'm going back to Hallsville. Maybe Mr. McDonald knew more than we were giving him credit for. Sure he did the damn thing up.
Do you know where it is, Joe?
No.
Any idea?
Have you been there?
No, I went to, cemeteries up in Longville are not up on the, facing the river or anything like that.
You know, on the Kentucky side, between Hallsville and Tell City, on the Kentucky side, it's very shallow over there. There's a big sandbar that runs all along there. Dad remembers the wreck of a boat on that side in that sandbar.
The wreck of a what?
Boat?
Oh, I thought you said boat, and I was going to think,
No, that in the, before the big dams came in, the water would get very low. Dad could walk across the river and stuff. But he remembers the hull of a boat stuck in the sandbar over there.
But unless I misread this as I was skimming through it here just now, did he not say it was up on top of a hill?
Cemetery.
Cemetery, yeah. So that would have probably been
There is one on top of the hill there.
that way. Yeah.
And
And if it really were a steamboat there, I wouldn't have run around that thing up there in 1854.
Well, we'll go looking for it.
Okay, a tall tale from a sharp trade. All steamboating wasn't Mardi Gras trips to New Orleans. There were plenty of small boats and shark trades here on the lower Ohio. Well, I once heard of a packet trade from Rockport to Taylor's Point. And you know that took a brave man to set up business on an 18-mile run like that, even if Owensboro was in the middle of it. Now, don't bother trying to find Tannersport, Indiana on the chart. It doesn't show up on many. But years ago, there was a little community by that name just about the head of the French island. And I found out about this run from the late Arthur Bud Durham of Rockport. It all came about when I asked him if he'd heard of the boat called the Peter J. Clark. Why, sure, I remember Peter J. Clark. She was a little stern wheel steamboat about 180 feet long, owned by Captain Peck and Paul Owensboro. Used to run a fair there. I was on her back in 1898. We ran a packet trade from Rockport to Taylorsport. Rockport to Taylorsport. Yep. Peck and Paul was on as captain and pilot. His wife was a cook. Old man Dallas Hickman was the engineer. Forget the engineer's name, but I started out as a linesman. What do you mean, started out? Well, I went to her as a linesman, but hadn't been on her more than a few weeks when the fireman went up the hill and never came back, so they put me in firing. After a while of that, Miss Beckenpaw took sick and they asked me to cook. Well, I figured that was better than firing, so I cooked. But that didn't last too long either. Captain cut his hand real bad and couldn't steer, so they moved me up to the pilot house to steer it, while the captain set it out on the lazy bench. You were really getting around.
I think I
Good. That's not all. About the time the captain's hand healed up, old man Dallas Hickman come down about the rheumatism so bad he couldn't ship up. He was about 80 years old, you know. So I went back and ran the engines while he sat out and watched in a chair. Then what happened? Well, I've been on that boat for 6 months. Held down every job on her, but they still wouldn't be paying me more than $2.51 a week I started out with, so I quit. I'm surprised they even ran her without you. They didn't for long, wasn't enough trade anyways. Whatever happened to the Peter J. Clark? Don't recollect. They laid her up, sold out, think she's burnt somewhere. And that was steamboating too. Mark, you introduced some characters.
I think a BS detector is working.
I think you make some of this stuff,
Yeah.
I'll tell you the truth. Uh-oh. We're getting ready for the break and refreshments, and so this one is called, oh, I thought it said moonshine. It says moonlight mischief. I mean, never have heard this story if I hadn't gotten curious about Laura Jean. That was the trim little runabout Captain Gene Howard designed and built at Jeffersonville. She was something to talk about, all right. Was famous as the fastest boat on the river. Anyway, Captain Jim played with Laura Jean for a while, then sold her to Will Bettinger of Tell City, so she operated around here for a few years. Will Bettinger's daughter once told me, when Daddy bought his car about 1910, Mama made him get rid of his boat. That may well be, but as she was saying this, it crossed my mind that Will should have kept his boat and forgotten about the car. For Will Bettinger bought a sporty little roadster and one day tried to straighten out a curve between Tell City and Troy. He was the first automobile fatality in Perry County's history, victim of a heavy foot and loose gravel. When I was a boy, we still spoke with awe about Dead Man's Curve. Anyway, it was about my continued curiosity about Laura Jean that led me to the story I'm about to repeat. For it occurred to me that I didn't know what happened to her, and that wouldn't do. First, I approached Earl Bettinger, since Will was his uncle. All Earl can remember, for he was a boy at the time, is that she was sold to a man in Lowell. There was a boathouse that went with the boat. And when the new owner came down to claim the boathouse, he had a blind mechanic handling his boat. Earl remembered this deal because it kept the whole town talking for a long time. Now I was really curious, more so about the blind mechanic than about Laura Jean's new owner, so I fired off a letter to Alan Bates. Surely he'd know all about a blind mechanic from Lowell, and of course he did, and threw in this yarn about him to boot. So I quote from Alan's letter of July the 6th, 1970. The blind mechanic was Eddie Mack. He worked for Hellemuir's Bakery here in Louisville as a fleet truck maintainer and planner. He did a good job too, even did power wiring, etc. He moonlighted on the river boats and did much work for the Bert McBride. This guy was the sort of mechanic that you had to work on in a .003-inch oval out of a shaft by hand. He was at no disadvantage because sighted men can't see that fine either. His tools were pretty special, so he could read a micrometer and so on. I went to him and he was small, wary sort, full of good humor and confidence. One night he rowed the excursion boat America with Birch McBride. Birch was the pilot. The two of them were in the pilot house when Birch turned and said, "Eddie, here comes Mitch," Captain Michael Smith. "You get up here and steer." Eddie said something like, "How do I know where I'm at?" Bert said, "Don't worry about it. She's out in the middle and there ain't nothing anywhere near us. You just let the wheel go a spoke or two one way and then the other, and we'll play a joke on Mitch." Eddie stepped up the wheel and Birch hid himself behind the lazy bench. Captain Smith came in, settled down on the bench, and Eddie let her go a couple of spokes to the right. Pretty soon the captain noticed that it wasn't Birch at the wheel. "Is that you, Eddie?" he asked. "Yep. Where's Birch?" "Think you went downstairs for a piece of pie." "Are you steering this boat?" "Yep." "How the hell do you know where you're at?" Eddie said, "It's nighttime, ain't it?" "Yes." "Well then, Captain, I'm just as well off as Birch or than other pilots." That's the end.
Those are good stories. That should get printed.
Yeah, it's nice to have these. Well, where'd our president go? Did he go get a piece of pie?
He's got two steering the boat.
Well, I don't know where we're going, so I adjourn this section of the meeting. We'll have refreshments and all right. Speaking to our later.
Good job, Joe.
Good to meet.
Thank you.